Today on the Business Builders podcast, we're continuing our series about effective networking and exploring the importance of planning. So in this episode, we discuss the three major activities associated with planning. They are mapping your network, scheduling your activities, and preparing to ensure that you achieve results. Well, welcome to the Business Builders podcast. We are your hosts. I am Brenton Gowland.
And I'm Ron Tomlin.
And Ron, you've been away camel trekking.
Yes. Most people think camel trekking is about riding camels. This is about the old camel train concept up in the Flinders Ranges. It was fantastic.
So you walk the camels and they carry all the heavy stuff,
all your gear. It's like through hiking, but not having to carry your own gear. And it's very gourmet too, I've got to say.
But you ate the camels?
No. The crowd that takes you camel trekking prepared beautiful food.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience.
Sorry, that was a terrible joke.
Any joke's a good joke as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I must admit, I did think you were going to ride the camels. I was a bit surprised when I found out you were walking with them.
No. I don't like the idea of riding camels.
So did you actually have your own camel that you were leading with like a rope or something?
No. The company that does all the work and the guy who guides us takes care of the camels. He has over 20 years experience with camels.
Oh, wow.
So can't recommend them highly enough.
Yep.
It's Beyond Flinders and Beyond, I think is the name of the company. Plug for them here.
And you went up to Wilpin a pound?
Afterwards, yes.
Afterwards.
It starts in Blindman.
Okay.
It starts in Blindman. So fantastic to see all the wildflowers at the moment.
Yep.
Beautiful up there. Very wet compared to what they're used to. So it's wonderful to see that the country coming alive.
If you're looking for a healthy adventure, then sounds like a good one. So we'll highly recommend that.
I have to admit, I came back a few kilos heavier because they really do feed you incredibly well.
You walk all day and then you still put on a little bit of extra love.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. It sounds like my kind of holiday. Anyway, let's get stuck into it. At the moment, we're working on effective networking. So we're running a series. Last episode, we spoke about how to define your purpose. And some examples of purpose might be that you want to win new clients, you want to find a new job.
It could be about establishing new friends. It could be about finding people who can help you in terms of supply. It could be building a community of a common purpose. Whatever it is, networks help people. And it's important to define why you're building your network.
Yeah, and we spoke last week about that those networks help you throughout life and in every kind of situation in your career and personal life, really, because you might have you want to find a partner. That could be part of networking in a social level.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably a good one for a lot of people. So we do it without even thinking about it. Cool. A lot of times.
So last episode, as we said, we spoke about defining your purpose, which then really sets the pattern for how we network. This week, we're going to speak about planning. So we'll get into that in a minute, but we'll start with our sponsors, and they are...
Of course, it's SA Business Builders.
Yes, and we run networking events for business professionals every month here in Adelaide. If you're listening internationally, obviously, you'll have networking groups in your area, but we made a little bit of a discovery recently, is that we want to keep things simple. We've been finding that people way more enjoy not having a structure to networking events, which is really interesting, considering we're talking about networking.
Well, let's be fair. There's so many structured events out there. It's nice to have something a little bit different. Getting back to the core of what we started with SA Business Builders, which is informal networking.
Yeah, great. And then there's AdaptCo, which is me. And I predominantly come in to help people with their marketing, but then I also end up helping people get unstuck because marketing often shows where there's holes in the business, things where we need to apply strategy to be able to make sure that whatever new initiatives we come up with, they can be supported by the business. So I come in, help with the marketing, and then help businesses move forward. That's our sponsors for this week.
Fantastic.
Okay, so getting back onto our topic, we are talking about planning today, Ron. So do you want to give us a bit of an overview about this to get us started?
Okay. The way I see it and what we've talked about, there's three major activities associated with planning your networking, and that is to map your network. Mm-hmm. So it's basically following the same line. Where are we now?
Yep.
and where do we want to be in terms of determining where you want your network to go,
Yes.
or, what you want it, how you want to develop, then scheduling, and finally preparing.
Okay.
So map, schedule, prepare. If you
Great.
remember nothing else, remember those three.
Those three words.
So it's worth now exploring what we mean by that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the really important thing again is to just remember we've defined our purpose. So we know that the reason we want to network, there might even be several reasons. You listed off a few things there, but it might be, yes, we want to find clients, but we want to find running partners. We want to find people who can help us in our business. And in the back of our head, if we're an individual who doesn't own a business, we might go, well, my future's in my network because my next role will come out of that, etc. But anyway, we bring the purpose into the planning. So when we start looking at mapping our structure, scheduling our activities, and preparing how we're going to go about networking, we keep that in the back of our head. Yes, this is my purpose. This is what I want to do.
And let's be fair, purpose will change over time.
Mm-hmm.
So be aware of the purpose as you're doing your ongoing planning for building your network.
And I might just say on that as well, you talked about that, where do you want to be bit? And Ron is referencing the Demystifying Strategic Planning series that we ran, way back at the start of the year. So that was, I think, episode 13 through 15, 19, something like that. And one of the key things you do in strategic planning, which is similar here, is like with the map analogy, you work out where you are now and where you want to be, which is the mapping part we're about to talk about.
Yeah. So and when I talk about mapping your network, most people have never sat down. They have a network. We all have a network of associates, of friends, family, all that sort of thing. But most people have never sat down and thought about it from the perspective of, well, what is my network?
Okay, so before you get stuck into that, can I ask, so what actually is mapping then?
Okay, so literally sitting down, putting you at the center of a piece of paper.
Yes.
And then starting to draw out.
Like a mind map.
Whatever you want to call it. Mind map. I like that. Drawing out arms and then talking about different categories. So
give us some examples of categories.
Okay, so it's two basic categories. It's business categories and personal categories.
Yep.
In business categories, you can think about, for instance, my clients, my customers, or of myself and my business. In the next category would be referrers, people who will never be clients or unlikely to be clients, but who know people who might be clients or prospects. There are also professionals. And what I mean by professionals is these are people who might be in different professions than me or different industries than me, or might be suppliers of mine.
Yes.
Okay. So they're people who could be useful to me and my clients and my network, but they're unlikely to be clients. There's also, if you're in an organization, there's internal, the internal network that you have.
Yeah.
And never forget that in the internal network in an organization can be just as important as every other network that you have.
Particularly depending on the size of your business. Because if you're at a place like BAE or one of these big multinationals, then that becomes more important than ever. Even if you're in a company that's 20, 30, 40 people and so forth, where you start to lose contact with different parts of the organization, it becomes very important.
Yeah. So, and again, it stems back to your purpose. If your purpose is to get a promotion, to building a network to get a promotion, then internal is going to be incredibly important.
Okay, so when we talk about mapping, we're really talking about, creating that mind map, but that then reflects in categories that we think of, right? I call them sometimes buckets. What are the main areas we're going to put people into? And so I know that we've mentioned personal there. We'll get on to that in a moment because we're talking about business networks predominantly, are we?
Yeah, well, never underestimate the fact that the two can overlap. If you think about your personal networks, start with your family, friends, people in your community, and when I say community, I'm not just talking about physical community. You might be a part of a club. Wow. You might be part of some type of group, and it's not about just location. It could be that you're part of a international artistic group.
Well, big ones are sporting clubs and churches.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I know that people we interviewed Bill Caskey. I've been listening to their podcast for a while. This was a few weeks or a few episodes ago. And they talk a lot about their church community and the business people in them that they're accessing through day-to-day networking activities. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Well, let me give you an example. sometimes my tech members, the CEOs that I work with, need some advice or some support or a service.
Yep.
I have friends in my personal network who are professionals,
Yes,
who might be ideally suited to provide that service.
yes,
Having that network means I can at least give those CEOs some idea of where to start by putting the two together. So I'm using my personal network, my friends' network, to provide me with suppliers who would normally sit in my supplier network to help some of my clients.
And what I think is really important with what we're talking about with mapping, because we're talking about personal relationships here at the moment, is this highlights the fact that when we map people out into categories, we treat those groups of people differently. What I'm talking about is we know that we're going to give personal people in our network more attention than we are, per se, business contacts that are kind of seldom, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. So more acquaintances than friends.
Yeah. Anyway, what I'm kind of getting at is that kind of highlights that those different categories are going to have different functions for us or different purposes. So you mentioned before that a category might be that these people are suppliers, or these people are professionals, these people are referrers, these people are potential clients. So each of those is going to be used differently as we define what we want to do with our network. So when we started this conversation about mapping your network, and not many people do it, we start with who we've got, right?
Absolutely.
So where do we go from there? Once we've mapped out and we know, well, this is all the people in our network, all the people that I currently have access to.
And can I make a suggestion for the people listening? When you start this activity, you probably start with something like an A4 sheet of paper. And I strongly recommend you use a bigger sheet of paper, because what you're going to find if you start thinking about this is your network is far more extensive than you think. Start with an A4, but you're going to very quickly move to an A3 or a piece of butcher's paper, because your network is fairly extensive when you start thinking about it and you start mapping it out.
Well, on that, I hear you completely, but there are different ways of mapping. So I use a CRM. So I will literally get, and the way I do it is I go, what buckets, what main, because I work by categories. I go exactly what you just said there: client, supplier, referrer, advocate, whatever. I create whatever those key areas I want to apply to people, and then I put them into a CRM, like a spreadsheet. So you can do it different ways. If you're very visual, you can do it with that mind map kind of way. But I do it by either putting people in a spreadsheet or a CRM, so I can literally see the people and see I've got this many people in this group, this many people in that group, etc.
Fantastic idea. Because once you start putting this on, I like starting simple.
Yeah.
Start simple, see how extensive it is, and then you can start using the categories that make sense for you. Use a CRM or whatever mechanism you want to keep a document.
Well, I think what you've said there, I think the mind map is really important to find the categories, because it's about creating a bespoke network, because the network is personal to you, right?
Absolutely.
So in business, we work for someone or we run our own business, and they're two different things really. But if you work for someone, you go, am I building this network for my boss? Well, partly you are, but you're really building your own network. So you're using your bespoke network that you're building up while working for someone else to generate sales or generate leads or generate referrers for that business you're working for.
The other reason I like to use a visual mechanism is because the next step is to determine what you want your network to look like. And that's about saying
before and after.
Yeah. That's about saying, okay, where do I need to strengthen my network? And because it's guided by my purpose, but where do I need to strengthen this network? It might be clients and potential customers. It might be referrers. It might be I need to have more contacts with professionals who can be useful to my clients. Whatever the reason, whatever you're building your network, it will soon become obvious where the gaps are.
Yeah, so it's almost like you create a before and an after. So that's where that mind map really works, because in my example with the CRM, I would be applying my final state or the future state that I want my network to be as a categorized list of terms in a CRM that I can filter people by. So it's almost a filtering system that you create. Who am I going to put in what bucket? So what you're saying is you got mind map number one, here's what my network looks like now, and then here's where I want my network to be. And then I would apply the result of that to a spreadsheet or to a CRM.
And it'll soon become obvious when you've got hundreds of names on there that you need a different mechanism for documenting all that and keeping track of it.
Yeah, okay. So, and look, I guess the really important thing to take with this is I got to say what I think. And I think the mapping is literally the most important part of the planning process, because the other two things that we're about to talk about, scheduling and preparing, really then work on, right, we want to build this network in this fashion, and the mapping sets it out. And I think you're right. I think the mapping is actually a lot of hard work and a lot of thinking, right? Because you're sitting there looking at names, you're considering, well, this is what I'm doing with my business development plan, or this is what I'm doing with my business. These are the kind of people I need to be talking to. Then you're taking that all back and mapping it against actual people that you already know. And it takes time. And sometimes people can go, well, oh man, I'm spending all this time doing nothing, but you're actually doing something very, very valuable, because the most valuable thing to a business is the list of people that are talking with you, are in conversation.
Yep. And like we discovered in demystifying strategic planning, it's an activity that most people don't do. They don't do particularly well, and they don't realize they don't have enough information about where they are now.
I actually think they don't do it because they don't realize the importance of it. Because, we all naturally run to, well, if I'm doing these activities, then I'm going to get results. If I'm not doing activities, I'm not getting results. When you spend a week, 2 weeks mapping out a network structure, and it can take that long. If you've spent any time in business, I've got 3,000 or 4,000 people in my network directly. That takes a little bit of time to work out where they all fit.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that you'll soon get a sense of, in these various categories, there are people who are very close in your network. You probably have about 150 people who you know closely, and then people start moving out, even in a category. I've got relatives in the United States that I've never even met.
That's great.
They're still relatives.
Yeah.
That, so there are people who are more distant. There are people who are closer to you. Yeah. So you'll start to categorize them on that basis of proximity as well.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because when you map that out, and I've got the same thing, and like for me, it was getting involved with Bill Caskey and Brian Neal. I wanted to get involved with their network in the States, and I joined their program because I wanted to build contacts all around the world. And it's worked, because we come together once a month and we connect via Zoom, and I've slowly got in contact with them, and some of them are now meeting with me in different kind of perspectives and so forth, and talking about different things in business strategy, and slowly that's growing. So you might have areas of your map that are slow burn, because I can see a future state right now in the next 1 to 3 years I want to do this, but in the next 10 years I want to be working internationally and I want to be doing this. So you slowly work on those bits. So your map becomes very important as well at time framing, or setting time frames for who you're going to talk to in what volume.
And that's why having the purpose right at the beginning to focus. You're going to be building a network, but what's the focus at the moment?
So I guess what we're doing is we are really stressing with all of you that are listening that the mapping is the most important part, and it's so important. But once you've got the map done, then we get to scheduling. So Ron, give us a bit of an overview of, we've got a map where we want our network to be in the future. So what do we then do in the scheduling part when we're planning?
Well, this is really important as well, and it's putting the time aside on a regular basis to undertake some of this work, some of the doing that we'll talk about next time, making sure that you are spending, it's a case of the urgent versus the important. The urgent will always win, but networking is important because it will help you in the long term. So making sure you put time aside in your diary to undertake the activities. And some of those activities might be things like events, writing blogs, LinkedIn posts, and we'll talk about all that in the doing stuff. But making sure that you have allocated some time for this on a regular basis. And one that's really important is when you've done all these things, you've gone to events and you've posted your blogs and all that sort of fun stuff, having time to follow up afterwards. So allocating some time, not just for the doing, but for the follow-up, and in some cases, even the planning. What's my next step? So making sure that you've got diarized time for doing this on a regular basis.
Excellent. So the scheduling part is literally scheduling the activities that you're going to do as part of your networking activities to build your network to match the map that you've created.
Yeah, and I think part of that scheduling has to be determining, if I want to, for the sake of argument, talk to referrers, that's where I really need to build my strength in my network. Where do they hang out? And I'm not talking about physically, but
well, what kind of businesses are they? Because if you're an accountant, your referrers might be financial advisors or people who are dealing with businesses. Like it might even be BDM people.
Yeah.
Because you want to win new clients to be in your accounting firm. If you're a defense company, it's different. If you're a software company, it's different again.
So it's about figuring out where they hang out. And like I say, hang out could be physically, what events do they go to? It could be, do accountants participate in LinkedIn? Or are they more on Facebook or some other mechanism? So thinking about where these people are and how I'm going to get to contact them.
Okay, so you would then go through and of course you've got your purpose and you've got your map, so that's going to influence the type of activities you're going to go to. We want to work out where they're hanging out, but you also might, there's a whole heap of strategies here. You almost also might want to go, well, what do I want to sponsor? What other activities could we be doing? What sporting events can we be going to? What, again, online digital kind of activities can we be engaged in? What communities can we be engaged with? Who can we be talking about where can we find out about what kind of things to go to? Because part of our networking might be getting in with people. You talk about referrers who can say, well, you should be going to this, you should be going to that. How do we share network? All of those things. I agree with that 100%. And so then the schedule part is that we're actually, as you said earlier, putting this in the diary. And what I really love is the fact that you talked about scheduling the follow-up, because that's the thing that everyone misses out on. I know that when we go to a major event and we talk with BD people, it's really critical that you follow up within 24 to 48 hours. Otherwise, there's a trailing kind of success rate that drops and drops and drops and drops because people forget what you've talked about. So if you don't follow up fairly quickly, you're going to lose those opportunities.
And again, and we'll talk about this in the doing, but the follow-up should be about how can I demonstrate my usefulness to this person? Mm-hmm. How can I demonstrate a connection to this person? It's not about, I just want to make sure that he knows who I am. It's, I want to make sure that I am doing something useful to him. And that's, when we talk about doing, that's about the curiosity.
Okay. So now, as far as planning is concerned, we've talked about mapping our network. We've talked about then scheduling our activities, actually putting them in the diary, scheduling our follow-ups. And then the last point that we're going to talk about is then we prepare. We prepare for the doing. So Ron, talk us through what are the things we need to do. We've got our schedule. We know what events we're going to do. How do we prepare to make the most of our networking opportunities?
Well, it could be from simple things like making sure when I go to an activity, I've got my business cards. It can be making sure that I have different versions of my new modified elevator pitch. And if you want to know what I'm talking about there, look at episode 12 of Business Builders, because we talked about how the elevator pitch needs to change.
That's another episode that really surprised me because people listen to that. It's called The Elevator Pitch Must Evolve. That just keeps getting people listening to it. I think we struck a nerve there.
And it is because, the elevator pitch was a great idea when it started, but it did have to evolve. It does have to evolve. But make sure you've got that ready.
Yeah, so it's about having the right stories collected and ready to go so that you can talk to people at different levels. So if I'm talking to a referrer, these are the kind of stories I'm going to tell. But you have to also then prepare your questions, Ron.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to, we talked about mapping your network. You need to be able to ask questions to determine where these people fit on your map.
And being able to not necessarily put people in boxes, but categorize and making sure that you're ready to ask the right sort of questions of this person in that genuine curiosity. And I'd say one of the other things is the mindset that you're going to go into this networking with. How am I going to prepare myself just before the event to be in the right mindset, not to sell, but to be curious about who the people I'm talking to are.
I think a good way to do that is to understand your process, right? And because this is something that people fall down in. They go, I got to build my network. I've got to do this. So they want immediate results. But if you start, and again, I keep referring back to different conversations. When we spoke to Bill Caskey, one of the things he said was that BD people, if they really want to get good at what they want to do, is they need to be funnel conscious, right? So, the top of the funnel is kind of awareness so that people know you exist. And then there's different stages of the funnel all the way down to a sale, right? What that was kind of getting at was that I understand when then I'm talking to someone and we're just getting an awareness kind of us, we're not going to take them straight down to a sale. We need to understand that they're at the top of the funnel and that's a different conversation to a bottom of the funnel conversation where already trust is established.
Yes. And a lot of this is about going in with the intention of building connection, not making a sale.
Now, the stages of the funnel, just because my brain didn't allow me to remember them earlier, I think it is awareness, consideration, and close. Is that correct?
Well, there's different models.
There's different versions.
I always remember, because it's easy, the AIDA model.
Yeah.
Awareness, interest, desire, action.
Right, okay.
That's what we're trying to, where are people at in when I'm talking
Most of the digital funnels are kind of 3-stage, which is awareness, consideration, and close.
Hey,
right?
I'm old school, so you know,
I know. Well, that's why we work. You're my mentor. I'm the young, funky, almost 50-year-old dude.
Young?
Yeah,
funky?
I don't know about that anymore. I just realized the other day I'm 2 years off 50. Damn it.
Oh, well, that
I'm looking forward
that
to
ship
it.
has sailed in my case. So.
Yeah, excellent. Anyway, so again, we're just closing off on mindset. Understanding your process will really help you set the right mindset. I'm going into a meeting, a situation. I'm meeting new people. It's all about awareness. Awareness is not about closing, right? So awareness is about getting familiar with people, understanding them. So having that understanding of what stage of the funnel you're at when you're talking to people is important.
And don't forget, while you're there with a purpose, and it's good to have that purpose at the front of your mind, don't forget you'll meet people who will enhance your network no matter what. So they might not be important to you today, but knowing that they can build your network is important. And again, that's then about having that genuine curiosity. Mm-hmm. How is this person, where do they fit in my network, and how can I be useful to them and they be useful to me?
Okay. So we've talked about in preparing so far that having your elevator pitch ready to go, having your mindset in the right place. And then I think another one is having the right materials so that we know that when we go to an event, do we need a business card? I went to an event yesterday and everyone wanted business cards, and I usually just do the thing where I'm tapping a phone with LinkedIn and teaching people how to use the scan codes and things, and they're, didn't know LinkedIn could do that. Anyway, there's different times when business cards are appropriate. If you're in defense, you'll have a quad chart. If you're at a trade show, you're going to have some sort of capability statement. I think having those materials, at least with your marketing department, guys, I needed this, I needed that, being prepared well in advance is super important.
Very much so.
And I might just add one other thing in here that we haven't really spoken about, because we've been talking about events a lot. So when you plan your activities, one of the things you might do is you might say, every morning I'm going to ring 3 people before 10 o'clock.
Oh, great story there. Great story there. A fantastic speaker on our tech circuit, a guy called Philip Hesketh from UK, talked about when he was in advertising. And he realized that he was losing clients, or his business was losing clients. So he created this mechanism, 10 before 10 on Tuesday. And he would call 10 of his existing clients before 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. He wouldn't get through to all of them.
Yep.
He'd have the list ready. His PA would prepare the list, and he'd be talking to them about their existing, the work they were doing, what they thought. But what was important was not actually the conversations. It was the rhythm or the cadence of getting into that 10 before 10 on Tuesday.
Yes.
And that's what I was talking about before when I was talking about the fact that you have to schedule this stuff. It doesn't happen. It will get pushed to one side because of the urgent.
Yep. And my point, and I think that's fantastic, but my point is in preparing the materials, when you've scheduled, okay, that's an activity I'm going to do 10 before 10 on a Tuesday, that you actually schedule, like you create an agenda for these conversations, that you know what you're going to speak to or the questions you're going to ask. And preparing the materials might mean preparing the script. You don't have to be so prescriptive that it's like, here's exactly what I'm going to say, because it's not a cold call. It's like, no, here's the 3 points I'm going to cover.
Oh, he would always cover, what are we doing? How are we doing at the moment? And then he would ask a killer question.
Oh, what's that question?
Yeah, he would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are we doing? And people would say 7 or something like that. And most people say, how do we get to a 10? And he would realize.
You've just defined net promoter score.
Yeah, I know.
Killer question.
Yeah. It said not how do we get to a 10? How do we get to an 8? If you gave us a 7, how do we get to an 8?
I like it.
There are some people, I know, tech members, who say, I'll never give you a 10.
Yep.
Right? But I will give you one more if you do this.
Yep.
So people can think about that.
Now, if you're listening and you want to learn more about this, look up Net Promoter Score. Just Google it and it will give you a full definition of what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are good questions. So in the preparation, we get our elevator pitch, we set our mindset, we get our materials. And I think what I want to really drill in is the thing that we also do when we're preparing is we prepare our response to these people. You talked about follow-up in the scheduling, but we actually almost prepare our responses before we've gone to the event. So, and what I mean by that is like I'll have a CRM, I'll have a bunch of written templates that I've created over time where it'll be, I might have the business cards or whatever, and I'll put them into whatever my system is, and I'll send an email straight away from this template that has 3 points in it, maybe has a document or whatever it is, but it'll just be prefixed, ready to go. And that's especially important if you go to an event where you meet 20 people. You might go, I want to specifically respond to these 3 people by ringing them, but the rest of them, I'm not sure, they might fit these different buckets, but I want to touch base with them. So I'm going to have this response ready to go. So I don't have to spend a whole day writing 1,000 responses to different people.
Given that follow-up is the thing that a lot of people get wrong when they're doing networking, make it simple for yourself by doing some preparation beforehand.
Oh, yes. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I know what my process is. So I went to an event yesterday, about 10 to 15 people gave me their cards and said they wanted to chat. Then there's a whole bunch of other people that we're going to send some material to. So I responded to those 10 to 15 people, literally prepared the email straight after the event, scheduled them to go the next morning at 8:00 so that there was a bit of time elapsed. I wasn't sending it on the same day, but it's all happened automatically. And it took me about half an hour to prepare those responses because I already had all the bits and pieces ready to go.
Fantastic.
And it's about being efficient. And then a certain amount of those people will respond and those relationships will then start to build slowly over time.
And it's all about having those processes. Make it simple for yourself. Have the processes ready.
So to review, you need to map your network, where it is now and where you want it to be, because the where combined with your purpose, the where you want it to be will help you then determine the activities you need to schedule. And then you spend time scheduling those activities. And last but not least, you do the preparation for the actual doing, which we'll talk about in the next episode.
Fantastic. I love the fact that we've given people a really easy step-by-step approach to doing something that a lot of people do very badly.
Yeah, and I think it's just understanding it, because I think there comes a point where you understand that you need to get better at these things. And sometimes it's difficult to find where's the where-to guide on networking? Because and I know you've talked about when we talked about strategic planning, if you want to see all the books on strategic planning, they will fill a lot of libraries and they'll be thick and whatever else. So it's the same with networking. There are books on books on books on books. Where's the quick guide that can show me how to do this? And that's why I like the fact that we're doing this series right now, because I think people need it.
Absolutely. Well, on that basis, we've done the planning. Next time, the doing.
Well, I look forward to the doing, Ron.
So it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. We will see you in a couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to talking about getting stuck into the activities. Bye for now.